In today's video, we're discussing a lot of things around the Montreal Canadiens and things we might see here in short order and over the offseason. Will top prospect Alexander Romanov be signing very shortly? Could they swing a big trade as well, moving one of their top forwards to get help on their blue line? And will Ilya Kovalchuk re-sign with the Habs this summer? We'll jump into all the Habs rumors coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we're talking about a variety of things concerning the Montreal Canadiens today. I've come across several news items that indicate there could be lots of activity here on the horizon in the short order, as well as once the official offseason actually kicks off here. Now, to kick things off, I want to get started looking at their top prospect and defenseman, Alexander Romanov. Now, the KHL just announced that their season is now officially over, has been canceled. They were early on in their playoff season when everything started happening, when they suspended their season over in Russia, and now they've decided that it's too complicated to proceed with the remainder of their playoffs, and their season's now canceled. So there's a lot of talk about some of their free agents over there. When will they be able to sign NHL contracts? Because some of them clearly have intentions on doing so for next season. Now, it's not quite clear yet exactly when they're going to be allowed to do that, because technically their season wouldn't have been over had they played it out. So obviously the rules are usually pretty tight over there. But either way, there is a lot of talk that Alexander Romanov very well could sign with the Habs very quickly as soon as he's able to. And if the NHL were able to resume their season, that he could actually sign for the current year to be and be on their roster, to be on part of that if they were able to resume hockey for the 19-20 NHL season. Now, of course, if that doesn't happen, depending on when NHL can resume and when Romanov can officially sign, very well could be delayed till next year. But regardless, it's still good news, indicating that it looks as though he definitely will be signing and coming over to join the Montreal Canadiens as soon as he's able to. I mean, he's a top-notch defenseman. He's really shown that he's developed quite a bit in the last few years since being drafted by Montreal, and would be a welcome addition to that blue line. So that's certainly an interesting piece of news for the Habs, because if he were able to join them and they were able to resume regular season games, having some extra players back there could make a difference between, maybe moving into a playoff spot versus not, depending on what they're able to do and how they would organize whatever games they could be played. Of course, that's certainly still all up in the air and more questions than answers, so we'll have to remain to be seen. But moral of the story is that one of their top prospects should be joining the team in the very near future. A lot of the other information in today's video comes from a Sportsnet article by Eric Engels, where he discusses a variety of things for Montreal and other areas of need that they're going to address during the upcoming NHL offseason. One of them being the backup goaltender situation. Clearly, Carey Price needs to have a more reliable backup goaltender than Keith Kincaid. He definitely won't be back in the fold. And it sounds like they would definitely like to have Caden Primo, the top goalie prospect in the system, to have more time to develop and be a starting goaltender at the AHL for a little bit longer before thrusting him into an NHL role. Clearly, if he joins the NHL team, he's going to sit on the bench quite a bit and be a backup to Carey Price, which, even though it could be a good experience for him, I think it probably would be better for his development to be playing a bigger role and getting on the ice more frequently, being the starting goaltender for the Laval roster instead. That being said, the Montreal Canadiens do have a lot of cap flexibility, and therefore they could go shopping for a more experienced, proven netminder who can hopefully come in and spell Carey Price a little bit more frequently and give them a little bit more of a solid backup option than they had this past season. They could look at some guys like Corey Crawford, for example, in Chicago, whose contract is up. He's from Montreal. We've talked about that before. I don't know if he'd want to go home to play or if he wants to try to stay in Chicago. There's certainly some other options for some backup experienced goalies, including Anton Khudobin in Dallas. Of course, there's Jaro Halak in Boston as well. Of course, there's a connection there where he played in Montreal before, so he's very familiar with the team and the city and how all that works. So that might be a potential reunion. Could we see Halak and Price once again be a goaltender tandem for the Montreal Canadiens? That certainly would be interesting. Obviously, at one point, Halak was traded in favor of keeping Carey Price back when the two were both much younger and getting into their prime parts of their NHL careers. Also got another veteran out there like Brian Elliott as well in Philadelphia, whose contract's expiring, and that could be another veteran option. All of these guys could be had for a reasonable price. With the Habs having cap flexibility, I think that would be probably one of the best ways to go here to address that situation with their goaltending situation. If they can keep Price well rested and keep him playing well and have a solid backup option, that'll certainly add a few more wins to their totals and certainly increase the likelihood that they can get themselves into a playoff spot. Now, this article from Eric Engels also goes on to mention that it's pretty well all but assured that Ilya Kovalchuk will return to the Montreal Canadiens this offseason as a free agent. Clearly, he seemed to enjoy his time in Montreal. It was a good fit. He played well. He put up good points. He seemed to be quite happy there. When the Habs traded him, they really didn't get a great return. It was anticipated that they would have gotten a much better return, but many believe they did him a favor trading him where he wanted to go, and even if the return wasn't going to be as good, to kind of stay on good terms, to increase the odds that he would come back during the summertime as a free agent. And obviously, whatever contract he signs, I would imagine it's going to be more than $700K. It's going to be more than the league minimum this time. But I don't expect it to be too crazy high. There's probably going to be built in with a lot of bonuses. So depending on games played and goals and production, that he can earn more money, that would make more sense. But probably still looking at a $2 or $3 million deal would be my guess, something in that range. But as far as term goes, not quite clear if it'd be a 1 year, 2 year deal. I wouldn't think too long. Probably 2 years would probably be the most, at least from a team perspective. That's probably the most I would want to do. But clearly, he proved he could still play. It was a great fit there. It was actually, working well with some of their younger players too, and could be a big part of the team's more immediate future. Will Ilya Kovalchuk return to the Habs this summer? According to Eric Engels, it's all but a done deal. I would certainly love to get your thoughts on it, especially if you're a Habs fan. What do you think of the idea of signing Kovalchuk to a free agent contract this summer with a contract that has lots of bonuses built in, so you're not paying too much, but you still get the player back in your lineup? Now, the other big part of this article that was mentioned was a potential trade, which we've heard comments from GM Marc Bergevin before, talking about how they would consider moving it forward this summer to improve their blue line. And even though I mentioned youngster Alexander Romanov likely is coming over, as good as that is, you don't want to thrust some of these younger players into too big of a role, and they very well could still use some more defensive help. Clearly, they have guys like Shea Weber and Jeff Petrie who are still, putting up some decent numbers and are still pretty decent back there. But they do have a lot of other younger guys who could use a little bit more insulation. And there was some talk in this article about the possibility again of going to the Minnesota Wild to inquire about either Matt Dumba or Jonas Brodin, and that he felt perhaps Max Domi might be the trade chip they use in order to bring in one of these steady blue liners. Now, of course, there's a difference of opinion out there on whether or not the Habs should do this type of trade. Clearly, Max Domi needs a new contract. That contract, according to Bergevin, shouldn't be difficult to get done. But, of course, his production was down this past year after having a really stellar year in the first year since joining the Montreal Canadiens after coming over in a trade where they were able to move Alex Galchenyuk. Clearly, the Habs have won that deal. That worked out quite nicely for them, but it's hard to say exactly what Domi is looking for in a new deal. Some believe it could be up around $7 million, maybe a little bit less. And it's hard to say exactly what the term would be as well, and whether or not they want to go down that road. It's really going to boil down to negotiations on that contract. He's still technically an RFA, but only a couple years away from being an unrestricted free agent. So I'm guessing perhaps Domi might not want too long of a term, but I guess we'll have to see how negotiations go. They could kind of feel that out and see. But based on their blue line, I do need some help. I'm sure that would be the absolute best direction for Montreal. I know there was more talk about trading, struggling forward Jonathan Drouin. But of course, at the same time, they're going to get less of a return since his numbers haven't been as good. But to me, that would be the easier way to go here. Clearly, Max Domi at times has been a big part of the Montreal Canadiens, and it very well could be for the future as well. If you look at their blue line with Shea Weber, Jeff Petrie, you get Ben Sherrod, who I thought fit in nicely. You get Romanov, Victor Mete, a lot of the other younger players. I'm not really sure that they need to really add, another solid top four guy without moving out one of their other defensemen, and really Weber and Petrie appear to be staying with the team at least for the foreseeable future. I'm not really sure what the best direction would be for the Habs in that case, but according to Eric Engels' article here, he still thinks that there's a possibility of moving a top forward for a blue liner for the coming season. So if that's the case, do you think going to the Minnesota Wild and looking at a guy like a Jonas Brodin or a Matt Dumba would be wise? You got to remember, too, a lot of these teams have to keep something else in mind as they adjust their rosters this summer, as we're not that far away from a Seattle expansion draft. And if you look at the expansion rules being the same as when Vegas came in a few years ago, they're only going to be able to protect so many players, and they don't want to put themselves at risk to make a big acquisition and then be at risk to lose them or lose another key member of their core players. So I guess they have to keep all that in mind here as well. So let me know what you think that the Montreal Canadiens should do. Should they consider trading either Drouin or Domi? Do you think the Wild makes good sense to go after one of their top defenders like a Matt Dumba or a Jonas Brodin? Is that the best deal that the Habs should do? And of course, I want to know your thoughts on the other items discussed here today. You're on Romanov coming over here real soon, Kovalchuk returning, as well as the backup goaltending situation. Clearly, Marc Bergevin has a lot of flexibility this summer. He's got lots of draft picks for the draft when that takes place. He's got lots of cap flexibility as well, which is something that a lot of other teams don't have, that he might be able to take advantage of. And I'm not really sure he's going to be going down the offer sheet route this summer again, but he couldn't completely rule that out as well. They could go about addressing some of their team needs in a completely different fashion without giving up some of their assets. So let me know what your thoughts are on the Montreal Canadiens offseason plans, and we can discuss further down in the comments. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.